it's not easy to be great. It's very challenging. The commitment, the consistency over time. And that's one of the things Kobe said. He's just like, it's simple math. I just put in double the hours as everyone else when I was a teenager. It's the first year he started playing basketball at summer camp, he didn't score 1 point in this whole like summer in this tournament that he played in. And then he started doing double the hours, and the next year he was like the highest scorer. He was like, it was simple math. I wasn't more talented. I simply put in more hours.
Pretty solid segue for about 30 reasons to get to a little bit of your chat with Kobe Bryant, because I think it encapsulates so much of what you're talking about. So I watched it again this morning, and we talked about it when I was on your show, and I hadn't seen the interview yet of you and Kobe. And what I said to you in that interview was that this was just a few weeks after he died, is that it felt like it was like a rip in the universe, because it's hard to fathom, putting aside the tragedy of all the other people and his daughter, of course. But those aren't public people that we know. But of course, it's as equal a tragedy, obviously. But there was something about Kobe that it was like, I told you, I was watching sports, the Spectrum Lakers channel the day before, and I saw him, and he was just being interviewed, and he's in a suit, and he's got the beard, and he looks really sharp, and I was like, man, that guy's just living his best life. That was literally the day before. Wow. And it feels like a rip in the universe when someone who's doing all of the things that you just described, who has reached the pinnacle of their sport, but then flourished after and started this basketball academy and a gajillion other things, then disappears from the earth. So can you just talk a little bit about what it was like to sit down with Kobe and what he taught you, and did he have all of those pieces? Because literally just everything that you just laid out right there, that's what he was talking about in the interview, and you could see it was real. There was no BS behind it. You really could.
It was a powerful experience. The whole setup of it was powerful. We booked the interview the day before, so I didn't really have much time to prep, which was probably a good thing for me, because I didn't have like 2 weeks to think about, I've got Kobe. It was like, we literally booked it at 6 p.m. I think the night before, and then I was there at 6 a.m. the next morning in his office in the OC. And I remember the most powerful thing he taught me was not what he said, but his example. And what I mean by that is when we got to his office, I think it was probably around 6:15, 6:30. The interview was at 8 o'clock. And I knew the publicist was like, you got 20 minutes. I think she originally said you got 15 minutes, but I was like, please give me 20, right? I'm gonna ask 2 questions.
Yeah.
We get there, and the assistant opens the door for us, and there's a big office space in the Orange County. And she says, here's where we normally film. But in my mind, I was like, that doesn't really look that good. Can I look around the office and see if there's another spot we can set up our cameras? So we walk through the office, and we go down kind of this long hall with conference rooms on each side of the hallway with glass windows. So you can see inside the conference rooms. And then it walks down into another big open space of more office chairs and things like that. We walk down. I see the other room. I'm like, I don't really like anything here. Let's go back to the original space. So we walk back through the glass hallway, and the last window on the left, I see the lights are off. In the back of the room, probably 20, 30 feet back, I see a shadow of a man like this looking up, just looking up at the ceiling. And no computer screen was on. There was no phone in his hand. And I look real quick, double take, and I see it's Kobe sitting there like this, just looking up. This is 6:15 in the morning. And I'm thinking, our interview's not till 8. And I'm thinking to myself, I asked the assistant, I go, is that Kobe? She goes, yeah. And I go, what's he doing here so early? Like, this is his company, this is his space, why is he here? She goes, he's been here for almost an hour, and he was at the gym with his daughter, the one who passed away, at 4 a.m., working out with her. And he comes here, he's always the first one here, and he's always the most prepared. And I'll go, just that moment alone of seeing Kobe as a shadow looking up, and I can only imagine he was visualizing his dream. He was going over his game film for the day. He was planning what he was going to be talking about. There was an interview with me afterwards with Lil Wayne, who was there. So they were setting up another part. It was kind of a surreal just morning. Yeah. Lil Wayne and all his bodyguards and this whole crew is there. I'm there with one person setting up our 3 cameras, and we're like, hey, And I was just like, this is surreal. And about 15 minutes before our interview, so for another hour, hour and a half, the lights are off in this room. And now people starting to come in around 8:30 in the office, and so there's some activity happening. And I'm sitting there in the chair just kind of waiting, just trying to like be ready. I don't know, is he going to come out early? Is he coming out on time? I don't know what's happening. He ends up coming out probably 2 minutes before 8 o'clock, the start time. And the publicist gave me a bunch of papers of everything not to ask him. A list of things you cannot talk about, from his past to his parents to all these things. Like, don't mention this, don't mention this. I mean, a list. I've never had this before. And so I know to myself, I've got 2 minutes to connect with arguably the greatest of all time, who has just won an Oscar as well, by the way. And 2 minutes to connect before our 20-minute interview, right? What am I going to say? And hopefully he doesn't, you know when you meet people that are really famous and you're inspired by it, and you meet them and you're like, gosh, I'm really let down by them.
They say never meet your heroes.
Right?
Yeah.
And this guy was the complete opposite. He was, right away came up to me, gave me a big handshake, and was just like, hey, thank you so much for being here. It really means a lot to me. We're trying to get the message out about our podcast. Like, thank you for taking the time. Looked me in the eyes. First thing I said to him was like, I just want to say thank you. I'm friends with a lot of Olympians, and all of them say that during the last couple Olympics, you were the most giving athlete, that you would show up to other sporting events, that you would take photos with everyone in the village and during lunches, that you were just so kind and giving. So as a USA handball player, I want to thank you for how you show up during those times. And right away he goes, you play handball? And I go, yeah, I love handball. And he goes, I love handball. Playing it in Italy growing up, that's all I did as a fun activity.
Yeah.
And I go, amazing. Yeah, it's such a great sport. I wish we had it here, the USA, more. And then I mentioned a couple of people we had in common, and he's like, man, those guys are my brothers. Like, I love that. I'm glad we have some good connections. And then I said one more thing. I said, you know, your team has told me what not to share and what not to talk about. Is there anything else off limits that I shouldn't talk about? And he said, rip that up, ask me anything you want, and take as long as you want. So I was only supposed to have 20 minutes. I think we went 40 or 45. And I tried to be respectful because the publicist kept saying, like, wrap it up in the background. And I was like, okay, let me be respectful. But even the last few questions he answered, where he was talking about, like, his whole mission was to tell great stories. And him talking about love and family, for me, it was really inspiring. Not only the words he says, but his example. He isn't just saying work hard and outwork everyone. He's actually showed me as an example. I didn't know if he was going to see me seeing him that morning. Like, he didn't think I was going to walk past his office because I wasn't supposed to.
Right.
But he was there. And just that example of, man, I don't get there to my place 30 minutes before my interviews, right? You come in when you're ready, but it's like, just that example of hard work shows why he was so great, and that was inspiring to me.
Isn't it interesting that, you know, they say the same thing about Michael Jordan? He outworked everybody. Yeah. He practiced the hardest. Like, you'd think that every athlete would be like, oh, that's the obvious way to do it. Or forget athletes, that all of us in our lives would be like, oh, you want to be the best at what you do, you got to work the hardest. You got to show up first, and you got to leave last, and blah, blah, blah. And yet 99.999% of us don't do it, even though you look at the guys that you admire most, and they're the ones doing it.
It's a big sacrifice. It's a lot of time and a lot of energy, and you have to give up so much to go all in on one thing. So I know why it's hard to do. I mean, it's like, he was up at 4 a.m. working out with his daughter, and then he was at the office at 5:30 or whatever it was, or 6 or whatever it was, and it's like, it's a sacrifice. We'd much rather be comfortable and sleep more and watch Netflix more. I like watching Netflix. It's not easy to be great. It's very challenging. The commitment, the consistency over time. And that's one of the things Kobe said. He's just like, it's simple math. I just put in double the hours as everyone else when I was a teenager. It's the first year he started playing basketball at summer camp. He didn't score 1 point in this whole summer in this tournament that he played in. And then he started doing double the hours, and the next year he was like the highest scorer. He was like, it was simple math. I wasn't more talented. I simply put in more hours.
It's a good transition to something else that he said that I think is interesting, where you were asking him about when he was sort of hitting his stride. And he talks about this moment where Shaq is injured for like 8 games, and he scored, I think, over 40 in 8 straight games or something like that. And then Phil Jackson calls him into the office when Shaq comes back and basically is like, now you got to tone it down.
Yeah.
Because now Shaq is back and the East plays different. So when we get to the finals, we're going to have to do this differently. And he, you know, you'd think that he would just be like, no, we're winning like crazy.
I'm dominating.
I'm better than Shaq, and we don't even need Shaq. You know, they had their own problems later. But he basically was like, yeah, so I listened to the mentor. That's what I wanted to get to, because you talk a lot about mentorship. He listened to the mentor, in this case, Phil Jackson, who had already done this with Jordan. And he dialed it back, and then, of course, they end up winning a championship.
Exactly.
If you'd like to be inspired, motivated, and educated by some of the most successful people around the world, check out the School of Greatness full episode playlist right over here. And if you'd like to see Lewis Howe's interview with me, click right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.